Hi, it's Pastor Steve, continuing our journey cover to cover, going through the Bible. And today, on January 15, we are looking at a very interesting passage. You might say this is the central theme of the Joseph narrative. And it's just a few chapters today. So you guys are, have a lighter day. Chapters 40 and 41 of Genesis. As I look at these passages, one of the things I need to remind you, which I'm going to do over and over again, it's this idea that you're reading a narrative. It's not saying that this is all great. It's not saying that this is bad. It's just letting us know what happened. But why this passage is so important is because this is what you see that puts Joseph ultimately second in charge of Egypt. Now, quick word, at this point, you might remember from yesterday, Joseph has already, even in prison, risen to the surface where he is respected by the prison administrator, and he is now like his right-hand man. But we come now to a dream, actually two dreams. One of a baker and one of the cupbearer. Now, when one looks at these dreams, there's an interesting question. Is this the way God normally functions? And is there a career position of dream interpreter? As we look at the corpus of Scripture, it is true that God sometimes uses dreams to communicate His intentions, both to individuals and maybe even groups of people, if there is a sense that God is moving. I know people ask me all the time, Pastor, does this dream have significance for my life? Well, the simple interpretation of Scripture, as the Apostle Paul tells us, is that if you have such a dream or a prophetic word, people who are tuned in to be spiritually sensitive should be asked. Because your dream could be related to the fact that your pizza did not digest well last night. But there are other times in which you see significance to dreams. Once at my previous church, there was a woman in our church from a Muslim background. She was from Iran. And she had a dream of a church with a cross that did not have Jesus hanging on it, but had 4 metal plates on each of the corners of the cross. Well, she didn't think too much of it. A friend of hers is visiting from Mexico who is a Christian and wants to go to church. And she thinks, well, I know of a church nearby, and she ended up going to my church. She walks into our church, and there is hanging the exact cross that she saw in her dream. You know what happened? She gave her heart to Jesus Christ right then and there. And then she was discipled by one of the women in the church. In the Muslim community, dreams are often the doorway in which they come to faith in Jesus Christ. So I say this to say, when you look at these dreams, yes, God can indeed use dreams. Does it happen regularly? I would say no. But can it happen? Yes, absolutely. And as we move further in the text, ultimately, Pharaoh has a dream that nobody can interpret, and it really unnerves all his counselors because Pharaoh wants them to interpret what seems to them to be completely opaque. And then the word comes out. Finally, the cupbearer remembers that there was somebody in prison that could interpret dreams. Well, the end result is that Pharaoh now makes Joseph second in charge of all of Egypt. And this sets Egypt up, and it actually sets up the ancient world surrounding Egypt as a means to survive a 7-year famine. Now, at this point, one can ask the question, is there any outside record of this Jew, Joseph, becoming second in charge of Egypt? There is no record in terms of hieroglyphs or writings that come down from Egypt. And we also know that there was a change of dynasty somewhere around that time period. It is really murky to study this historically. But what we know is that the written record that we have received places Joseph in this position. And we also see many Egyptian names that are fitting for the time frame and for the time period. So we have every evidence to believe that this story is reasonable and plausible. And in terms of excavation, many of the things mentioned in the Bible have since been excavated in the Egyptian area. And so just read the story and enjoy the story. And in terms of archaeology, sometimes archaeology takes a while to catch up with what's going on in our reading of the scripture. You may not know this, but archaeology is the second youngest science. The youngest science is the space age. But before then, it's archaeology. And so archaeology is still moving forward, discovering when these things took place, what can we uncover. But what's important to see today is that Joseph continues to rise, the power of dreams and the significance of God intentionally placing Joseph in this place of power. We're seeing his sovereign hand at work. We'll learn more about that tomorrow. God bless you, and we'll see you soon.